Sometimes it just works out that way. You got an army, you've envisioned a path to victory, and then you get bested by a warlord who looks like he's playing hooky from middle school. Then your only option is to commit ritual suicide, so at that point, you might as well make the most of it. The warlord on the losing side of this story is a man named Mizuguchi, a man who in the flashback that opens Shogun's 7th episode, becomes a historical footnote by losing to Toranaga in his first battle. This is another one of those history being written by the victors situations that I brought up last week, in that the legend is that this unpillowed young man was such a stud that he cut off Mizuguchi's head in one clean blow. The story also provides some additional information about the Lord of the Kanto, but the thing that jumped out at me the most was the statement he makes about fate. Mizuguchi says, "It was fate that forced me into declaring an unwinnable war." The emphasis on this and the fact that they finally showed a pretty gruesome depiction of seppuku left me looking for connections throughout the episode. I bring that up because this show has been on a streak of leaving me a little more delighted after each episode. And it set some expectations last time through the tension between John and Mariko and the formal introduction of Ochiba. So when it didn't go back to those, it almost felt like it lost some momentum. This is the point in the story where Toranaga is stuck, and maybe that's the point of the episode, but that didn't work in its favor. They did pepper in some super enjoyable moments with Yabushige and Fuji, which are always welcome, and they introduce an exciting new character. One that we get to know fairly well in an impressively short amount of time, which is good considering it's so late in the game. And they pulled off the same trick that they did in episode 2 by smoothing over some rough waters with a big ending that delivers a surprise. But this was also the first episode where I wasn't entirely sure what the show was working towards in their version of Shogun's ending. What's frustrating about that is that I know the ending from the books and the historical events that it's loosely based on, but can't reveal those to explain where my confusion comes from. I can say that the biggest change, Nagakato's death, doesn't have a big impact on things that I'm expecting to happen later. There are other places where I'm not so sure, but I think we'll just have to wait a week because even though the story didn't move that much, there is still a lot to talk about in a stick of time. The opening flashback is an introduction to war for a much younger Toranaga and Hiromatsu. Another thing that jumps out about it is how prepared Mizuguchi is to meet his end. He's accepted this as his fate, which is something that we'll see reflected in the people who surround Toranaga in the present day timeline. He's trying to survive and look for ways to keep going, and a lot of the people around him are kind of like, yeah, well, we just sort of gotta kill ourselves then. As far as Mizuguchi's concerned, I suppose this is something that would be factored in before he made the decision to go to war. And then when he loses, it makes sense to want to be remembered as dying with honor. Of course, we'll learn later that the way it's remembered is a lot nicer than what actually happened. I can't imagine the horror of waiting for the mercy of death while a 12-year-old takes 9 tries to finally make it happen. But I do imagine that it would leave an impression on the 12-year-old warlord and influence his decisions in the future. The machinations of the regents in Osaka and the earthquake have left him with some important ones to make. At the end of the last episode, he introduced Crimson Sky, a full-on assault on Osaka Castle. To make that happen, he'll need more troops, and that leads us to the introduction of his estranged half-brother. Saeki is a complete wild card, which makes their first meeting tense, and he immediately wins you over by referring to himself as Toranaga's mediocre brother while wearing a helmet that says otherwise. It's a great entrance, and the laugh that follows makes it feel like Toranaga has once again made the right choice. Even before that feeling goes south, there's a lot of disorder behind the scenes as Project Crimson Sky is coming together. Toranaga is not pleased with the price he's paying to have Kiko entertain his brother for a week, and is even less excited to learn that he had to exchange a stick of his time listening to Gin in order to get it down in the first place. Blackthorne has his eyes on the sea, and is frustrated that all his new titles don't amount to much. He doesn't really get to do anything other than be a novelty domesticated barbarian for Toranaga to show off when it suits him. Fuji is surprised at home by her grandfather Hiromatsu, which would be nice if he wasn't delivering the ashes of her husband and infant son. And upon receiving them, she mentions how she can't wait to join them once her 6-month term serving Blackthorne is over. There are still some nice bits here. It's funny listening to her say how great it is to have his son Buntaro staying with them, and the implication that it's definitely not causing any problems. Also, Hiromatsu asks her to consider living. Maybe don't kill yourself when this is all over. Maybe enjoy the victory, which is clearly something she hasn't been doing. There's a moment where we see a shared realization that they have to project confidence in a victory even if the odds aren't in their favor. That says a lot even though the characters don't. Saeki has charisma and is the type of character that changes a room when he's in it, or a hot spring, and while he's enjoying a soak, Nagakado tries to act tough, talking about how he hopes Ishido sends lots of warriors for him to kill on the battlefield from Osaka. He even goes as far as saying that he hears the first kill is better than your first woman, which leads to some under-the-radar comedy when Buntaro asks where he heard that, and Yabu says it depends on the woman. With hindsight, this and a later scene where he comes to talk to Fuji while she's training with her Naginata work to fill things out and give his conclusion some extra meaning. Kiku's new gig means that Omi can't get any time with her, and while he's being turned away from the tea house, Gin hints to him that when Blackthorne was with Kiku, his heart was elsewhere, specifically with a different woman. This was a bit of a surprise to me. I guess it goes to show how much Gin uses her position to both collect and disseminate information, but we know that she's tactical in the way that she uses that. I'm not really sure what she expects to get from tipping Omi off to this. We'll see later that he uses it to work Buntaro up during dinner, but I'm still not sure what purpose that serves for Gin. There isn't much time to linger there because this episode revolves around the dinner's main guest, and Saeki knows how to step into that role. He retells the story of the boy warlord, complete with Toranaga striking off the head in one clean blow, but that's just to get everyone warmed up. After, he tells a less-known story of Toranaga crapping his pants when he was being sent away to be a hostage. Then he asks Nagakado which he prefers, legends and stories or the truth. The blatant lack of respect that comes out here is a sure sign he's not going to become the ally that Toranaga needs. And after they receive word that his army has blocked all the roads out of the region, he reveals that he's now on the Council of Regents. He actually took Toranaga's place. Ishido got to him before Toranaga and made him an offer that if you put aside the family connections is probably much better for him and his future. He delivers an order signed by the other regents compelling him to come to Osaka and answer for his treachery. He also informs Nagakado that his formal sentence for Jozen's murder is that he's ordered to commit seppuku, which is also essentially his father's fate. When Blackthorne asks Mariko about what returning to Osaka would mean, she confirms this and adds that half of his men will commit seppuku out of allegiance to him as well. Toranaga scolds Nagakado, telling him not to accept his order, and buys a little time by saying he'll consider the council's request, contemplate his options, and submit his answer by sunset on the following day. This creates a situation where no one knows what their lord will do, and they all realize there isn't much they can do while he's in contemplation, as Hiromatsu describes it. Yabu and Omi get bad news when they try to go warm up to Saeki. The general Yabushige sent to reaffirm his allegiance to Ishido came back as a head in a box, which means his fate is now tied completely with Toranaga's. Blackthorne briefly mentions trying to get to his ship, and the first time I watched this scene I thought it was just showing him feeling stuck, and then showing that Mariko wasn't sympathetic to anything he might be planning because of her loyalty to Toranaga. When I watched it the second time, I started to wonder if the implication was that she thought he was trying to plan an escape together and was just shutting the idea down because that totally goes against her sense of honor. It's brief so I can't say for sure, but there is a noticeable difference in how each of them is handling the weight. Everyone is growing impatient, so they're surprised to see Toranaga honor his meeting with Gin before he offers up his plan. This starts with her pitching a plan to create a safe area for tea houses like hers to do their business in Edo. The Guild of Courtesans and her plan is something that they explain in more detail in the book, and it's essentially the beginning of geishas, entertainers who are trained to sing, dance, and play music in addition to the other services related to the Willow World. Her idea to help courtesans age with the grace that they devote their youth to cultivating sounds like a pretty good idea, but it isn't something that Toranaga shows a lot of interest in, though he does appear to appreciate the distraction. And I expected this was going to somehow plant a seed that would turn into an idea, but when he tells her his future is too short for her far-reaching plans, she wonders aloud if that's really the case. When he says his fate is written, she responds that fate is like a sword, useful only to those who can wield it. She uses herself as an example. Born in a gutter and raised as a traveling entertainer, most would consider this a terrible fate. But as he can see, it gave her ambition and made her the most successful lady in Izu. She points out how his hardships made him the cunning man he is today. So she can't quite figure out how he could be caught so off guard by what happened with his brother. He has spies who could have warned him about the army approaching, so why would he make such a careless mistake? And you gotta give it to her, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But he makes sure she knows he's offended by any suggestion that he's anything but a victim here. She quickly takes it back, saying, "What would I know? I'm just an old whore," and then does a power move by leaving, saying that her time is up before he has a chance to tell her to get out. This is the big connection to the idea of fate that is brought up in the opening moments of the episode. By all appearances, Toranaga is walking around shell-shocked because he can't believe how unlucky he's been since the earthquake. Can't believe his fate, right? His men are all waiting for him to come up with a plan to save all their skins, and are otherwise resigned to following him to their deaths if that's what fate decides. Just like Fuji, they aren't spending much time considering other possible outcomes. We see that bubbling over in different ways in a couple of scenes that revolve around Yabushige. First, he strips down and makes a show of getting into the hot spring when tensions between the armies start to build up. Then he blows off some steam of his own, talking to Blackthorne, who he knows can't understand him. He sets the tone by saying the engine probably wishes he was the one who boiled alive in the pot, which is a pretty awful thing you might have forgotten because this character is so much fun to watch. But the man does have a sadistic streak. He notices that Blackthorne is wearing his swords, as he was ordered to do by their lord, so he suggests he learn how to use them. There's a bit of a lesson, which is more of a chance for him to embarrass the Englishman. And then Buntaro swoops in and looks like he might actually kill him to give us a good indication of where his head is at after Omi started shit with him at dinner. In this case, it's Blackthorne who appears resigned to accept his fate if need be, but it doesn't, at least not yet. Buntaro's not done though, and he goes to Toranaga to request permission to cut off the barbarian's head. I suppose if something's worth doing, you want to make sure you go through the correct procedure. Toranaga doesn't want to hear anything about it, and points out that if he's accusing them of having an affair, he would have to kill Mariko too. Which is something that she would be fine with, but every year when she asks him to end her life, he tells her no. So he just has to admit defeat and just sort of walk away. His exit leads to an uncharacteristic show of emotion towards Mariko's situation from her lord. This is another moment that I wasn't exactly sure how we were supposed to interpret it. The scene has some great acting from all involved, and you can't blame Toranaga for being tired of hearing about this situation, which has to be annoying since for all appearances, there isn't anything overt going on between them. He gave Mariko a job to do, and she seems to be doing that. So when he tells her she has to choose between his fight against her father's enemies or the barbarian, I wasn't really sure what he was on about, besides the issues it's causing for Buntaro. And maybe that was just it. But what exactly does he expect her to do differently? Or did she just happen to be the person that was in front of him while he was having a mini meltdown? She can't figure it out either, so she begs him to let her commit seppuku. It's an earnest plea, but he slaps the blade she carries around with her out of her hands to bring an end to the conversation. As sunset approaches, he gathers his men and asks why Hiromatsu didn't speak up when his brother was telling what he refers to as the ridiculous story of the boy warlord. This sets up Hiromatsu to tell the truth about the mess he made of it, and gives Toranaga a chance to smile and deliver the second best line of the episode when he questions who picks a child to be their second. Legend and truth are not the same thing, and it's interesting to learn that this is what Toranaga is thinking about as his men all gather around him. His brother arrives to hear his formal answer for the council, and he shocks everyone by surrendering. Yabu and Nagakado tried to object, But he tells them even when there is evil in this land, no one has the right to tear the realm apart. Blackthorne would disagree, and he says as much. He mocks the idea that Toranaga is the brilliant master of trickery, adding that he tricked his own vassals into a noiseless smothering. He's not wrong, unless Gin is right and this is all part of the plan, but it's kind of funny that for all his passion, no one sitting there could understand anything he said beyond, "You're all dead," which he said in Japanese. Saeki gets the last word and says that he'll escort him to Osaka tomorrow. From this day, he'll have nowhere to go and nothing left to be. Might not be a great brother, but he's got a way with words. He decides to celebrate his win with Kiku, and he enjoys it so much he promises to make her his 7th consort. She asks his permission to elevate their play, and then dips out whenever she gets the chance. I haven't mentioned his clothing yet, which has been top-notch throughout the episode, because of how important this long robe he puts on here turns out to be. Nagakado arrives with the plan of ending his uncle and creating his own legend, but like Mizoguchi, he becomes a historical footnote instead. As he advances to deliver the death blow, he slips on that extra long robe and receives a mortal wound as his head hits a rock in the garden. Saeki questions where is the beauty in this, which is a sort of continuation to the best line of the episode that he delivered at dinner when he said that Kiku was beautiful, but beauty's a fleeting pleasure, like trying to grasp a river or fuck a sunset. Nagakado's story and the episode end there. And there's only 3 more episodes to go. It'll be interesting to see how Toranaga handles being under escort by his brother, and if his son's death changes anything according to the big picture. Toranaga may take a backseat in the story for a while, which may be why they spent the extra time focused on his headspace in this one. Gin does make a good case that he's not being completely upfront about his plans. And I've seen online that a lot of people are wondering if his brother isn't in on the plan as well. That wasn't what I was thinking, but it is possible. My main arguments would be that it gets a lot more complicated if Saeki gets asked to be regent, sends word to Toranaga, and then they plan this all in secret. Plus, even if Toranaga wasn't telling the people closest to him what was happening, the ending still makes me think that his brother wasn't in on it. We'll have to wait and see though, and I think that's a great place to leave things. Please like this video if you enjoyed it, please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.